Support our combined mission and drink Gun Barrel Coffee. It's an excellent roast for an excellent cause. Our house roast at Detective Story. Use promo code Detective10.
She said that he fell several times in the tub while trying to get out. She said he probably got the internal injuries when he fell or when he had to push him back into the tub, which is interesting, right? Because internal injuries is not something that we told her. It's not something that we're going to say to her. And that's a really telling statement.
Hey, welcome back to Detective Story. Thanks for joining in again. Today I'm doing something a little different I haven't done before, and I'm doing it for a couple of reasons. I am re-releasing the episode 23 about Allen Kalfus for a couple of reasons. The main reason is I think I went a little overboard. This is on me about, describing what happened with Allen, particularly in the title and description, which caused YouTube's algorithm to think it was some kind of violence porn and stepped on it. So a lot of you didn't get an opportunity to see it or get it pushed out to you, which I can tell based on the responses I get from other videos. That was never my intention. I kind of listened to the AI a little bit, entitling that. It's always about the victims, and it was always done to try and keep Allen's name out there, keep Allen Kalfus's name alive. 6-year-old boy, a first murder that we handled as lead detective, Sam, Manto, and I, and it should have always been about that. So what I've done is reworked a little bit, certainly going to retitle it and release it again. So what you're going to see here is what I intended for you to see originally. Also with this, I wanted to tell you that some of the input I did get was you really wanted to hear more about how we got his killer, his foster mother, Flora Stewart, to tell us what happened, to admit to killing Allen. So what Sam and I did, we sat down remotely and recorded about a 57-minute conversation just about that interrogation and what led up to it and how we got her daughters or teenage daughters to come around to telling the truth, which they kind of always wanted to do, but they were trying to protect her, and ultimately how we got Flora to go from her statement that this was an accident in total, which never made sense, to her admitting to the commission of a first-degree murder, brutal murder of Allen. So you can find that video, that 57-minute video, on my Patreon page. That'll be free. Everybody can watch that, and you get a real idea of how we go about that process. How do we get someone to admit to something that is about the worst thing a human being can do? We go into real depth there. I made that free. I'd like for more people to get to my Patreon page. I want you to be able to see that video and see that discussion between Sam and I and get that feel. So no cost to that. Just go check it out. There is a lot of other stuff on the Patreon page, so you can kind of check it out without having to join. There is some free stuff on there, but all of this is being done really because this was always meant to be about Allen Kalfus. As always, our goal here at Detective's Story is to make it about the victim and the victim's families. And so here we go. You're going to see the original video that Sam and I did in studio describing our kind of visceral response to our first murder investigation as lead detectives dealing with the killing of Allen. And then you'll also have the opportunity to visit the Patreon page and get an in-depth look at just the interrogation end of it. So thank you again. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your support. Patreon here. Please, if you haven't, like and subscribe on YouTube here. It really helps us. Leave a comment, leave a question. Do the same on Patreon. If you go there and you've got questions about how do you do this, anything procedural, or just like what's the thought process, we're happy to engage. We appreciate all of it. And as you can see, we've partnered with Gun Barrel Coffee. Great guy, Sal Dazzo, who owns and runs Gun Barrel Coffee. He's a veteran himself, big supporter of veteran first responders, donates $1 of every purchase to those causes. give us a discount code for you guys, Detective 10, which will get you a 10% discount off anything you purchase from him. The coffee is excellent. I promise you that. He sources the beans himself from all over the world, and then he roasts in house. He showed me that whole process. A very cool thing. Enjoy this episode. It's a tough one, but it's important. And remember, it's always about keeping victims' names alive, and in particular, 6-year-old Allen Kalfus, who certainly deserves it. How do you get somebody to tell you that they've done what is the worst thing possible, right? And you do that through empathy, right? Really, that's how you get it done. Hey, I'm Mike Hammond. Welcome back to Detective Story, Season 3, the opener. Super excited to be here. Cool new studio. Close friend of mine here, old partner. So here we are. We're back. Thanks for being here. We got an interesting, very difficult case to talk you through, but we appreciate you being back. Without further ado, let's get into it. On 22nd February of 2001, I got assigned the first homicide where I was the lead detective. I'd been homicide detective at that time for about 6 months, but that was the first case where I was the lead detective. And we'll get into a little bit of how that shakes out. But that case was the case of a 6-year-old boy named Allen Kalfus. He was a foster child who ultimately we found was murdered by his foster mother. It was a start case. And I think it's fair to say that poor Allen Kalfus never had a peaceful day on this earth. And I'm joined today on today's detective story by my partner at that time, longtime friend and homicide partner, also his first case as lead detective, as we made detective together. And that is my good friend, Sam Manto. Sam, brother, thanks for being here, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. It's truly an honor for me to be here. And you've been doing some great podcasts for, as far as I understand, like almost 3 years. I don't know why it's taken so long for you to have me here, but I hope we get through tonight, and I'll do the best I can. But it's certainly an honor to be
Thank you,
to
Sam.
be with you this evening.
It's an honor to be here. It's always fun to be around you, and I think our listeners will figure out pretty quickly why it's taken so long to get you on the show. But with that said, welcome back. Season 3 of Detective Story. Super excited that you're here. Really appreciate the support. It has been overwhelming and pushed us to start this really aggressive schedule for 2026. And we appreciate the support as always. So thank you. Heavy subject matter today. I've got the right guy here to talk you through it. Once again, you're going to get a view into the world of a homicide detective and what it's really like and what goes on. You notice a couple things here. One is that my co-host, Chris Kafkas, is not here today. Unfortunately, Chris is down with pneumonia, but he's doing well. I talked to him today. He actually sent some questions that he wanted to get out of this himself. He'll be back as soon as he's healthy, but Chris, we miss you. Get well quickly, brother. Another order of business I want to talk about real quick, and we do this. You'll hear me talk about this sometimes. Lost a really good friend and one of the best policemen in the city of Chicago's history, and that's Michael Cronin, Crony to everybody on the West Side and to me. Mike Cronin was a living legend on the Chicago Police Department. He was. His story was unbelievable, and I don't have the time to go into it, but just to tell you the kind of guy he was, he's a decorated Vietnam vet, lost half a foot in Vietnam, and therefore could not pass the physical to get on Chicago Police Department. He could, but they just wouldn't allow him because of that injury. Old Man Daley, the original Richard Daley, personally heard his story and gave him a waiver. He got on the Chicago Police Department, and his career is legendary. He was the most knowledgeable policeman in this city's history, very likely, well known to players,
people in the community, coppers, everybody, and articles written about him in the Chicago Tribune. He was a true legend, great guy, and for me personally, an amazing friend and mentor. Once I got to the West Side, I got to know Mike. I made detective. All along that process, he was never bigger than life to me. He was just a guy who worked his ass off, who cared about the community, who knew everybody's mother, grandmother, father, grandfather on the West Side. YouTube him, run him on Facebook. You'll see the stories are endless. We lost Mike after an illness a couple months ago. I want to just acknowledge his passing, how much we'll miss him, and how much he meant to this city. Sam, you knew him as well. Well, I mean, he was good to both of us, right? I mean, really taught us a lot.
Always great resource. Yeah, I'll never hesitate to help us with anything we were doing. And you've helped him with many things for many years also.
So that being said, let's talk about you a little bit, Sam. So to say that Sam Manto is a Chicago policeman and my partner, and it doesn't begin to cover it. He is served our country with pride and dignity. Retired as a full colonel in the U.S. Army. That's correct, right? And went into the Army as a very young man during the Vietnam era in Taiwan. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, that was the first assignment for the Air Force, actually. Started in the Air Force at 17, as actually the draft had just ended. So I was in the group that was like the first volunteers to serve the country. And I wanted to be a policeman, but I was too young to be a policeman. So I went into the Air Force and tried to be a policeman in the Air Force. And the Air Force said, maybe, but wound up teaching me Vietnamese language. And I was assigned to military intelligence to intercept Vietnamese communications in Taiwan. I was lucky enough to get to Taiwan, which is China. Most of my classmates went to Thailand and flew airborne collection missions over Thailand. But that's how it started. And then wanted to be a policeman 4 years later. That's why I got out.
Stayed in the reserves, though, correct?
Correct. Stayed in the reserves, and I was a sergeant in the Air Force Intelligence Service Reserves at O'Hare. And everybody there was an officer. I didn't even know what an officer was. And they said, well, Sam, you should be an officer, but you got to get a college degree, and then maybe you can come back. My brother was going to school at University of Illinois at Champaign, so I went down there to go to school after I got out of the Air Force and still being in the Air Force Reserves. But they didn't have a law enforcement program. At that time, there was a big push to have policemen do social work training. So they did have a Department of Social Work. So I studied social work there and got my 4-year degree from U of I as in a Bachelor's of Social Work. Then it came time to get commissioned and stay in the reserves or not. And ROTC had a program that if you get your degree, you can go back into the military as a lieutenant. To do that for the Air Force, however, which I was already in, you had to go back active duty. I didn't want to commit to that because I wanted to be a policeman. So the Air Force said, hey, check out the Army down the hall. They're a little bit crazy, but they're always looking for people. So the Army said, we'd love to have you. And I had a guaranteed Special Forces Reserve slot as a lieutenant upon commissioning for the Army. And that's how I wound up making the switch from the Air Force to the Army. There were great shortages in the Army at that time. So on graduation, you had to choose, what 5 careers do you want? 3 of them had to be combat arms. I chose military police, military intelligence, and of course you had to choose combat arms, so my third choice was infantry. And that year was a bad year for the Army, 1979. They had tremendous shortages in combat arms, so everybody that got commissioned that year got a combat arm. So they said, congratulations, Lieutenant Manto, you're going to be in the infantry. So I served in the infantry for several years, mostly at Fort Carson, Colorado.
And then by the time we meet, and I'm not going to gloss over anything necessarily, but by the time we meet first day of the academy, which was May 31st, 1994. We walk into the police academy, right? And we meet on that day. On that day, you were a major, correct? Am I remembering that correctly?
Correct. Yeah, just a real quick short version. So I stayed active duty with the Army, switched from the infantry after I could, got back into intelligence. But in 1990, I was a little discouraged with the Army. I thought it made more sense to have my own Army. So I stayed in the reserves, but got out and started a security and investigations company called National Security in Chicago, and wound up fighting crime on the streets of Chicago, plus also doing investigations. So at 1990, switched back into the reserves. So I was still in the reserves, a major at that time. And the opportunity came up to test for the Chicago Police Department, which I had always wanted to do my whole life. So everybody said, "Are you crazy? You're going to go from running your own company and being a senior officer and intelligence to pushing a blue and white squad car in Chicago?" But the people that knew me best knew that probably that's what I would choose. So as an old man, 37 at the time, and in May of 1994, got to go to the academy where I met Mike Hammond.
Correct. So clearly we could do an entire episode just about your background, and maybe we'll do that one of these days because I think it is fascinating. But the one thing that is critical of note right now is that, you and I became friends with third guy whose name I'll keep quiet because I don't have his permission to use it right now. But we've stayed friends to this day. But you and I's career trajectory took a very similar path, especially the first few years, right? But we worked together. You went to the 18th District out of the Academy. I went to the West Side. But pretty quickly, we ended up working in a citywide response unit called Special Operations at the time, which you actually got us into. And then the point I'm trying to make, that would have been about 1996. And then we worked together for several years in there. But during that time period, you start getting deployed. Our military gets more active around the world, right? And you start getting deployed around the world. And I don't remember the sequence, but I know, let's say between 1996, we start working together and SOS, and then 99, I got assigned to narcotics for a year, and then 2000, we studied really hard together. That's no joke. When they decided to give a detective's exam, finally after years and years, they hadn't given one. Sam and I studied harder for. You're a naturally intelligent guy. I studied harder for that test with you than I did in 4 years of college and 12 years of prep school. And we both did very well on that detective's exam and made the first class as detectives. So then we began working together. But again, over the course of our time as detectives, you got deployed again. And just to run down quickly, during those deployments, you were in Bosnia
and Kosovo were the first ones that happened. Millions of times to Korea, maybe hundreds of times. And then, of course, this case on Allen was February 2001, which interestingly is 25 years ago this month. And that was just 8 months before 9/11. And then, of course, that started a lot of multiple deployments for everybody in the military. And so been to Iraq several times, in Afghanistan. And
so where I'm going with that is we spent a lot of time together in the police department, and we've remained very close friends. But that sacrifice that you made for our country to go on those multiple deployments, that was time away from what you also love to do, being a policeman, right? So we had these patches where we worked together, and then patches where you're deployed, and then you come back and you get caught back up to speed again, what we're doing. Then you started getting promoted in the police department, sergeant. Ultimately, right before you retired, you were promoted to lieutenant on the Chicago Police Department. You retired as lieutenant, correct?
Correct.
Super glossing over that, and I apologize. We have more time. We'll go over that the next time because your personal history is fascinating. But for purposes of our listeners, and today I want you to understand Sam is a multi-talented, multifaceted man who we only have touched the tip on. Has been around the world, is a linguist. Always claimed he was a linguist. You say you speak 7 or 8 languages. I know the Russian you spoke. You taught me that was one sentence, right? Don't shoot me. I know military secrets. Was that the right one?
Correct.
Okay. So we had a lot of fun. This particular case was not a lot of fun, but so let's steer back there, if you don't mind. But that's a little taste of the man that's sitting across from me here, and his really deep background. So Sam, let's talk about that a little bit. You and I, we make detective. Very excited to be there. Very excited to get assigned to homicide.
I know we both kind of were in that same. I'm not trying to speak for you, but for me, it's a life goal. Like since I read that book right there in cold blood when I was about 16 or 17, you know what I mean? I kind of knew I wanted to be a homicide detective. I couldn't have articulated it probably at that time, but eventually I got there, and I felt amazingly lucky to be there. I know you're in that same realm, but your feelings a little bit. I mean, here we are, and to us, this is the big time, right?
Sure, it was a little different. The only thing I'd like to add to that is that you were always a West Side guy and knew the gangs and organized crime and all that stuff, and your life's ambition to be a homicide detective, which I thought was tremendous and worthy. And when we both amazingly made detective together, you were already deeply connected with all the West Side and the Area 4 guys. And I was downtown, and it was honor. I was glad that you were willing to work with me, and I remember you got a chance to put that input with your boss, and they said, Sam's not going to come to the West Side and Area 4, but to work with you, I jumped at the chance. So there we were, opportunity finally back together as homicide detectives.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So then the way this works is, and it probably makes common sense, but maybe if you haven't heard it, you make detective and you get assigned, and this works in different jurisdictions, different ways. State of Chicago's there's only two ways. There's two ways to make detective. You either get promoted meritoriously, which is supposed to be 20% of a class, and or it's a tested position, which is supposed to be the majority of it. We made it off of a test. Meritorious is a whole different thing. There was a time where to make meritorious detective, it was truly mostly out of merit. It was my impression. I could be remembering this wrong and speaking out of school, but it was my impression that the guys that made Meritorious Detective or the people that made Meritorious Detective had been shot in the line of duty, had done some really notable police work. It was a meritorious spot. Whereas the kind of like and this is not to disparage the people that did this, but my impression was that the political machinations for meritorious were more reserved for like sergeant administrative. In the Chicago Police Department, there are two avenues. You make detective, it is actually a separate position from patrolman or even the administrative structure, right? Now, we had sergeants that we reported to and lieutenants and captains in that, but they came back to the detective division from patrol. So we make detective. We get assigned to homicide. There are other options like burglary, youth division. There was gang investigations at the time, but that later merged with violent crimes. But we got pulled into homicide pretty much right away. But they don't hire our bosses at the time. We worked for some amazing bosses in Area 4. It is really hard to grasp now the quality of bosses that we were working for at the time. I mean, we knew at the time because it was a great experience. It was fun to go to work every time, but it was really like a golden age for bosses, and we worked for some amazing ones. But they don't assign you a homicide as lead detective right away. They send us out a lot, right, as we were together, but we were doing a lot of like canvassing, assisting other more experienced detectives. We sit in and write a lot of reports, but we're always, having those bounced off. I mean, the truth of the matter is, it boils down to, kind of time in the saddle to get experience to know what you're doing. But really, I don't know if you agree with this or not, Sam, but to me, you don't know what you're doing as a homicide detective really until you start going to court on these cases and you get your ass handed to you by a defense attorney, right? And you learn, you know what I mean? Like, wish I'd have wrote that differently, or I wish I'd looked at this differently, or, whatever. And then you start to really learn the job, right? So now here we are, February of 2001, and we've been there about 6 months, and we are up, right?
Yeah, and it was an amazing time, everything that led up to that. And for me, it's kind of strange, I think, to connect because everybody always like respects the military. And it was like being a policeman, being in the military, having my own security and detective company. It was all the same thing. Right? My goal was to help people that can't help themselves, and to, now this is Chicago, the big leagues at homicide, looking to put in the biggest and the baddest guys, and willing to fight that battle. So this case was kind of a shocker and surprise to me, because that's not what it was in this case.
You're right, correct. I mean, this is we get assigned this case, and it comes to us as a death investigation, and the difference being that with a death investigation, obviously you have a human who is dead, but it's not yet determined whether it's a murder, suicide, accidental death, what exactly it is, and natural causes, correct. And so it is a big part of our responsibility to help make that determination, and that determination is made in a number of ways. Most critically is generally the autopsy, the medical examiner's findings. That's often based a lot on our investigation as homicide detectives, our determination on scene, but other factors too. If they've been to the hospital, things like that. In this particular case, we have the death of a 6-year-old boy, Allen Kalfus, and we responded to the hospital, Mount Sinai Hospital first, right? And we immediately had concerns, right? I mean, even as though we were very, I think it's fair to say we were both very experienced police officers with 6 years kind of on the job, not like 30, but we had worked in some units we've been around, new detectives, but even then, like, this was concerning case just based on what we heard, right, from the scene.
Yeah, I mean, the case generally, right, when anybody dies ever, I mean, there's a lot of sadness in the world, and, accidents happen and bad things happen, and it was our job to go figure out what happened. And the explanation that was given was, hey, this young boy fell in the bathtub, and his mom was there, and his sisters were there, his foster mom, and they called 911, and there's nothing they can do, and they brought him to the hospital, and that's how it all started.
Right. Immediately, though, our concerns kick up, because I think first it was fire department personnel, paramedics said, hey, you know what? Like, this young man, his body was cold to the touch. They didn't just call 911 and bring him. We got to him. He was frigid, like he'd been laying in a snowbank, right? And then to piggyback on that, I remember the emergency room doctor telling us his body temperature was, I have my notes in it here, but even without those notes, the emergency room doctor is like, yeah, no. His body temperature is far too low for him to have died naturally in an apartment from a fall, right? Just like it doesn't happen that way, right? So immediately we're like, we got something going on here. So then we proceed to talk to amounts to the outcry witness, which was his foster mother, Flora Stewart. Her story basically was she told him to go take a shower, right? I'm really super paraphrasing here, but she heard a fall, heard a thump, something like that. She goes to check on him. He's unconscious, and she tries CPR. She calls 911. She can't remember if they instruct her to do CPR. She does CPR on her own. She can't revive him, and the ambulance comes, takes him away. That was her original story in a nutshell, right? Is that pretty close?
And remember, we were first at the hospital, so we did get that version. And then from the hospital, we went to the apartment. The scene, it's not a crime scene yet, because we don't know if there's been a crime there or not. But then we're working on the knowledge we've had, the doctors and everybody we saw at the hospital. But even as soon as we get to the apartment, other things start jumping up. Like we found the cold, wet clothes, some of the cold, wet clothes. And it's like, wait a minute, if he's taking a bath, why does he have cold, wet clothes in there?
And so, and the way this shakes out, you're right, it wasn't probably designated a crime scene, but we did have patrolmen from the 10th District who had it secured. So there was nobody going in and out of there that could have contaminated anything. They were protecting as though it was potentially a crime scene. Although at the time, you're right, we didn't know what it was going to be. She had two natural daughters and another foster child in her care. Um, and the two natural daughters were teenagers, I think, right? And they told a story that was similar to hers, but concerningly different details. I'll say, right? So we asked the three of them if they would go into Area 4, our office, to be interviewed further. At that time, Alan, to make this clear, Allen was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. He was deceased when he arrived at the hospital. So there was no kind of waiting on that. So Miss Stewart and her daughters were taken to Area 4, our offices, and then you and I proceeded to the scene, which was an apartment building, what we called low-rise kind of housing projects back in the day, right? Which I believe they're gone now, but they were at 4336 West 19th Street, which is basically just east of Costner and 19th Street on the city's west, kind of a little bit southwest side, right? So we go to the apartment, and then we start to find these things that are definitely concerning, right? There was a wet sock in the tub. There was a bucket.
A bucket with a wet sock in the tub. Some wet clothes on the doorknob, I think, hanging on the door, in a plastic bag too. And one thing, because of the cold, I forget if it was the first trip there, but we went out and bought a thermometer because we wanted to check the temperature of the water and stuff, because she said she was in the bathtub. But one of the first things we had already noticed was there didn't seem to be sadness or concern or remorse, which, after this case and having all the experience we had afterwards, you have tremendous emotion and sadness at all the crime scenes, even from the bad guys and their families and all that. But that seemed to be lacking here, and I thought that was strange at the time.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, no doubt about it. That's a good point. I mean, it was more of an explanation than it was a kind of an outcry of grief or anything concern of that nature, right? I mean, and I do think it's kind of, in retrospect, I think that is kind of a testament to our maybe an experience, but what our desire to really be complete in this investigation, right? Because what happens is we get notified, I think probably from our office, what happens in a case like this, we're often communicating back and forth with our office, because now we have witnesses and what turns out to be, a suspect, and turns out to be the killer in this case, in the office. So we're communicating back and forth with either our sergeant or the desk personnel in Area 4 saying, hey, we got witnesses, potential suspect coming there. Could you, make sure they're separated so they're not talking, make them comfortable, whatever. And we're going to the scene, going to process the scene, right? In those conversations, I think, and you remind me if I'm mistaken, we did go over some notes here, but I'm kind of trying to make sure that we keep this concise. We were told that there had been a prior complaint with the Department of Children Family Services, DCFS, that Allen, the victim, had claimed that she had held him or forced him into a shower of cold water as punishment for something he'd done, which had been investigated from DCFS and found to be unfounded or not sustained strong enough to take him out of the household. Am I correct in that?
You're correct. And again, I found this case, exceptionally sad, because as it was a fresh new investigation, and every half hour that went by, we were finding new issues to be concerned about. So that was the case. There had been that previous report, and then things just snowballed as the more investigation we did, the more terrible facts came to life. As an example, that, he was a foster kid, but DCFS was already involved, and MPSS was there. And in fact, they had been there that day. So there had been professionals with her and Allen that day, hours before this happened. And we had to develop all of those and pursue all of those different leads, and then they all added up to all of this different evidence, physical evidence and testimonial evidence, and nothing was making sense when you matched all that evidence up with the stories we were being told by the mom and the daughter.
Right, right. Yeah, and to go back to that, I mean, we're trying to be so thorough with this as our first case, and the concern that we were going to do everything right and cross our T's and dot our I's. We went out and bought a thermometer, checked the water temperature, which, people maybe think, well, it sounds like a detective work. It was. I mean, I just think years later with more experience, it's almost prima facie if as it turns out, if you beat a kid unconscious and leave him in a shower, stopped up shower of cold water, that they're going to go into hypothermia pretty quickly and not survive, right? But
that was news to me. I mean, we learned things. It's like, oh yeah, the water is cold, but I wonder how cold it really is, and we better be sure so that we could talk about that. And so we tested the cold water and the hot water, and I was surprised. It was 36 degrees. The cold water was 36 degrees, which will come into play later when she talks about how long he was in there.
Yeah, right. So we go to the scene. We have the crime lab come out. We have them photograph the scene, all those things that we do. Crime lab, but those, especially at that time, were some really experienced people, knew what they were doing. But still, they're directed by the lead detectives as to what we want photographed, what we want taken in. A lot of times you didn't have to do that. They knew intuitively, but it was always that communication. We get that done. And then we proceed back into the area and we start these interviews, right? And let's talk through the interview with Flora Stewart really quickly, because I know people are often fascinated by, all right, how do you get people from here to there, right? Contrary to, I think, a lot of times what's sold in the media and in Hollywood is, you can jump up and down, play good cop, bad cop, and all that shit. First of all, that was never you and I's really style, right? I mean, I think we kind of had a little bit of different style in that. I don't know. You once described it as overwhelming and with common sense, and I think that probably is more the style that we worked. I mean, I certainly had the capability to raise my voice if I needed to, and you did too. I mean, but in a case like this is more about listening to the first story and then saying that can't be true.
We play many roles at many times in police work, especially as detectives. And you were, Mike, one of the reasons you're one of the greatest detectives is you're a great people person, right? And so you can read people and you know that. But in addition to that, you're compassionate, just like I am. So we do need to listen, and you don't need to be harsh with anybody. And I don't know if the evidence is there, but my guess is we have more confessions than anybody else in friendly, professional ways, which causes us not to have to go to court a lot. But you were great with people, and sometimes it's frustrating when you're listening to such sad, horrific details of incidents, and yet in this case, as an example, you're thinking all along, because by then we had all that evidence that we knew about already, and it wasn't making sense. Right, her description of stuff, but yet you had to contain that and then pursue, look for the explanations and then maybe challenge some of that. Hey, you know what? You're saying this, but how could this be if it happened this way? But you're great at that. You're an expert at that.
Well, thank you.
Interrogation and interviewing skills.
Well,
right?
Thank you. I mean, we worked around some people that were the best probably in the country, and I think that played a big part in our learning process with that. But I think, as it boils down to, so what's that look like? A lot of people are probably asking, you're talking around it, what's it look like? So we sit down with Ms. Stewart and basically say, okay, walk us through this again, please, right? And let her tell her story in completion. And we are knowing all the time now that that's not matching what we've seen on a multitude of levels, right? I think it was first we would learn this later in autopsy, and we'll talk about that. But
I think even the emergency room doctor said, "Yeah, this kid's got some injuries. The older injuries. He has been beat up a little bit." And to backtrack a little bit, I mean, Allen was taken out of his original home for abuse. His natural mother, he was taken out of her custody, I think, in 1999, and then placed in the foster care system where he eventually ended up with Flora Stewart, right? And that's why, I kind of led with this. I'm not sure what there is. I saw no evidence, heard no evidence, and I'm not sure there is any evidence that this poor young man ever had a peaceful day on this earth. And that is part of us that will always be there, right? I mean, so we let Flora tell her story, and then we start to say softly, probably, or with empathy, like, okay, right, but here is what we know. So this can't be true, right? And this can't be true, right? And then I think the way that shook out, probably, and you may remember it differently than me, is we're doing that at the same time we're talking to the teenage parents. The younger boy who was also foster boy was also, because DCF had come in and took him into custody. I think he was too young to really be interviewed at that time.
Was he about 2, I think?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but he was very young. The story that the teenage girls told, the teenage girls were scared, right? Trying to be cooperative, also clearly trying to be protective of their mother. But they were not, I don't recall them in any way being defiant or problem, just very scared, very concerned about their mother. Allen was kind of an ancillary thing in their lives, I think, right? Is the impression I got. You feel differently about that, or?
No, I think that's right on target. I mean, they're clearly were told and had a chance to talk with mom about, okay, this is what we're going to say happened.
Yeah.
So they had their initial version of the story about when they got home from school, what they did after school, what mom was doing, where was Alan,
Right.
and how that all sorted out. And then there was the 911 call, and this is before any of the background stuff, but.
Yeah. The 911 call was significant in its way too, right? Because it was not congruent at all with the story that she was telling. I don't recall the details off the top of my head. If you do, shout them out. But I know
Someone is the time frame. It's like the girls came home, and so the first story seemed that Alan was in the bathroom by himself for 40 minutes, which didn't make sense. To have him there, especially then when mom said she was upset with him and angry with him. Yeah. And then, so the 911 call was that, right? The first version of the story was girls come home from school, everybody's sitting there doing their own thing, no problem. Alan's been in there a long time. Boom, they hear something, and the mom says, "Hey, go check it out." And they call 911, almost like this is an emergency that just happened. "Hey, my boy fell. He's not breathing. I don't know what we need to do." And then 911 starts giving them directives about how to handle that call. And again, that's just a piece of the evidence that really threw a wrench in their whole initial story.
It did, because the time frame didn't match up. Certainly the body temperature didn't match up, right? So what happens with this, we get to a point, and we know that autopsy is going to be a critical factor with this, right? So we get to a point where we are allowing her to sit with her latest version of the story, which is already starting to fall apart. It's changing. It's becoming incriminating. The details, I think she started to say, well, yeah, he did spill some hot chips on himself. He was not supposed to be eating them. So I told him to get in the shower, take his clothes off, get in the shower. So now she's getting there. I don't know if we confronted her with a prior DCFS complaint. I probably did, I think. But the point is, the next morning, first thing up, we go to the autopsy. And City of Chicago, bodies go to the medical examiner's office. Autopsies are generally done first thing in the morning. They start about 5:45 a.m. We don't, as detectives, always go to the autopsies, right? Because we have Chicago police officers assigned to the medical examiner's office. And if it's
a drug dealer shot on the street. It's not like it's less of value or that, but it's kind of case by case. If we know that the detectives on scene, the medical examiner, are going to be able to find out what we need to know from the autopsy, then we've got other things to do, basically. But in a case like this, where the cause of death is going to be critical, and the medical examiner often likes to have the scene detectives there to talk through, okay, what did you see there and what was there? And so we went to the autopsy, and I know for both of us that was a stark moment for both of us, right? I mean, we'd been to autopsies in the academy, we'd been to multiple as detectives because, hey, you guys go to the morgue with the body. We'd been there, but seeing Allen lying on that slab, I mean, first of all, he didn't look like a 6-year-old boy. He looked smaller and younger and just.
And we didn't see him on the scene. A lot of the times in other cases, you'll see the body all shot up or whatever. So then you have an expectation, like you said, you either don't need to go because someone else is going to have that covered, or you don't need to go to see what happened. But in this case, we didn't. So, it was definitely an emotional event, especially when it started to come out that, hey, again, it didn't match the story we were being told. And it looks like there were other injuries, multiple injuries.
Yeah, and I mean, look, you and I, and this is just part of the reality of it, all the tough guy shit aside, I mean, you and I both had been involved in very serious altercations. We had seen people die in front of us. Violence had become a part of our life, right? We had seen dead people, dead children, dead by this time. I don't know, going to that, I think both of us had young kids at home, right? Really hard to dissociate yourself from that. I think you have to, but it's not easy. And you walk in there and, okay, we're ready. We're going to do the autopsy. You walk in, you mask up, you glove up, and you go in and you kind of let the medical examiner do their thing and they have questions. And mostly it's about the scene. What did you find? Things like that. And they're doing their autopsy and we're looking at this little 6-year-old boy. And for me, it was like, man, this pathetic little guy here, man. And again, it just went through my head. I wonder if this guy ever had a Christmas morning that meant something, or I'm sure he had some laughing days, but boy, it was fucking rushed.
I think the other thing that hit me at that time was, he had nobody, right? So he's there because of his family, right? Nobody seemed to care. It was really just going to be all on me and you, what happened going forward.
Yeah.
And from there, then we went back. I think especially you were critical in the interview process. And then.
But let me back up a second here before you go further. I'm sorry, but so medical examiner at the time, who I don't have their permission, so I'm not going to name them, but I knew this medical examiner, very, very good at her job. She ruled the cause of death as hypothermia, but noted he had hemorrhaging to the soft tissues around his liver and bowels, hemorrhaging to his right kidney, hemorrhaging to his pancreas, hemorrhaging to his stomach, bruising on his butt, his inner thigh, his neck, his ears, bruising and cuts to his inner lip area, his left ear, a bump on the back of his head, a laceration to the tongue, and a bruise on his liver, and existing prior injury, notes of prior injuries on his extremities.
I think he had a big mark on his face, too, that we couldn't figure out. It appeared to be a burn mark or something. But
so he didn't fall in the fucking shower, right? He didn't fall in the shower. We walked out of there, we know that.
Not on his own.
And as you probably already tell, I mean, Sam and I are holding it back here a little bit, but Sam and I, we don't spend a lot of quiet time together. We do a lot of joking. We have a lot of fun. We laugh. We talk. There's not a lot of quiet moments. I will tell you, it is my stark memory that we had very little to say on that drive back from that ME's office, right? There was just not a lot to talk about, not even the case. Like, we knew what we had in front of us, but the way to seeing that little, forgive me, but the way to seeing that little boy lying there and his body cut open and dissected, and that was what his life boiled down to, man, it's a stark moment. And I will tell you at this point, Chris asked me to jump in with a question, though he can't be here. And that question is, he really wanted to know from us, like, for the average person, walking around in this world, the death of a child, the murder of a child is one of the worst possible things, right? And it's angering and infuriating, and you want vengeance. And, so how, as detectives, and this is coming from Chris, how do you manage that? How do you manage that anger? How do you manage that outrage and that all of those things and do what you have to do? And I think that's a really good question. I think maybe that's part of that silence driving away from there, right? And trying to contain those emotions. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Same. I mean, we handle a lot of cases, and I didn't expect that was going to be the type of case we're working with. But all the kids' cases, which we've dealt with, and there were several others, unfortunately, after that. But yeah, those are the worst, right?
I'd like to take a moment from the program to have a real talk about safety and security. Toward that end, I would like to introduce you to my friends over at Blue Knight Security Solutions, your ultimate partner in protection. Blue Knight Security Solutions isn't just your average check your ID at the door security company. They're a team of elite detectives, investigators, and law enforcement professionals with unparalleled expertise. Whether you need their real-world investigative prowess or securing your home, business, synagogue, church, or event, Blue Knight has you covered. From risk assessment to tailored security plans, they'll ensure your safety. Blue Knight Security Solutions provides street-smart operators who can handle any situation. Contact Blue Knight Security Solutions today at 773-706-4920 or visit BlueKnightSecuritySolutions.com.
All right. So we leave there, right? Now we're on our way back to Area 4, and we're kind of dealing with this. And to piggyback on Chris's question about how you feel, and that you do feel all those emotions, right? I mean, you certainly do. We're angry, and we're, coming out of that, seeing this little boy get dissected, we're just like, you really want somebody to pay. But I think a bigger overriding factor is maybe, and I think this is misunderstood, and I hope that I get this point across every time this comes up. Like, we become the last person that can speak for somebody like Allen, right? And this comes up. I went through this once before with conversation I had with somebody else about a murder of a prostitute who really didn't have any family, and I think there's this kind of thought process that it's a low priority for us, that it is not, and I'm not equating Allen with that, but I'm just trying to get this across. It's important for me to get this emotional part out and what it means to us. Like the bigger the lost cause it is, the more it means to us in a way, right? Because if we don't speak for an Allen Kalfus or some young prostitute who's got found dead in an alley who has nobody left to speak for him, then who's going to do it? You know what I mean? Like, it is, and I don't mean that in any grandiose way. I'm not looking for a pat on the back, but that's the fucking truth, right? I mean, that's what we're thinking. We got to figure out what happened here, right? I mean, is that fair to say?
I think that is. And then case by case, I think we process things differently. But this was a horrendous case. Not that, like you mentioned, every case is critical. I mean, we're competitive guys. We want to do our job. I know you and I can't speak for everybody, but we always wanted to be better than everybody else and do our job the best we can. Every case was important to us. We wanted to clear it and get all the evidence. And even if somebody came in with a quick confession, it was like, no, let's look at the evidence. Let's see if it matches. So there are so many different angles. But in this case, truly a sense of there's nobody else. I mean, Allen had nobody else. And it was going to be gone forever. So this was our time. The neat thing different about detectives and police, right? We're responsible. This is our case, and we're going to put it to rest, hopefully, one way or the other.
Yeah, and then we try and make this about victims and victims' families. But let's finish this out. So we go back, and now we know what we have. We know that Miss Stewart is lying. We know that something really nefarious happened, but we need to know exactly what it is. How do you do that? How do you get somebody to tell you that they've done what is the worst thing possible, right? And you do that through empathy, right? Really, that's how you get it done. Like, it can be ugly. You can hate hearing yourself talk about it sometimes, right? Like, look, I've got kids, and I know this can go bad, and I know they can be frustrating, and I know, and I know, and I know, and this can go bad, and it's tough, man. That part of the job sucks, but it has to be done. And in this case, that's what it was. Miss Stewart did not want to be the worst human being in the world, but she knew she'd done something horrible, and it became just a matter of guiding her towards telling the truth. Is what it amounted to, right?
Yeah, and I think that those are correct aspects of the theme development too. And it's not justifying anything, but you're being empathetic, you're building rapport, with the offender, and you could say, hey, it's rough being a mom, it's rough being we could understand you're getting frustrated, especially if he was acting up and all that. Not that we would justify it, but people want to, I think in most of our cases, people want to get it off their shoulders. I mean, they're human beings. They want to say, yeah, I messed up, or this is the, it took a little longer in this case, but, she started to change her story. When we confronted her with some of the injuries that came out of the autopsy, she says, well, yeah, you know what? He was acting up that day, and I did have to throw him in the tub, and he kept trying to get out, and I threw him back, and now it's like, oh, this is making more sense, and then explaining some of these other things, and then, well, wait a minute, why did you say something different? And then, are your daughters not telling you the truth? Oh, maybe can you ask your daughters to tell the truth? And I think that was a key part of the case. And
yeah, right. I mean, and this might sound harsh or devious or whatever, but this is the game you play. We had the added advantage there of having her two teenage daughters who were trying their best to be cooperative and whatever, and we did certainly use that with her. Like, you're gonna
with their mom's permission, though. I mean, none of this was under the table. Mom knew we were talking to the daughter.
No, but I'm talking about talking with Miss Stewart herself. Like, look at, you are dancing around this. And what you're also doing is putting your daughters in a really terrible position because they're trying to tell the truth. They're telling this bullshit story to try and back you. And this is taking down them down the road. Is this what you want for them? You know what I mean? And those are the type of avenues you push. And she ended up writing a note, right? Basically telling them the truth. After she explained the burn on his face, right? Which was he'd picked up a towel to try and wipe the hot chips off his mouth to hide that he'd been eating from her. And it turned out that was a rag she had put bleach on to wash the thing, and he burned his face with the bleach, which I think was total bullshit. But with that, probably let that go as we got closer to her getting to the truth, and eventually in stages, she told us, yeah, this is what happened, and then all of this, as you say, starts to make sense. The injuries start to make sense. The horror of it starts to make sense. But again, you can't. At no point were we ever like, you horrible freaking, no, you don't do that. You're just like, I get it. You know what I mean? And I mean, again, you walk out of an interview like that, and you have the state's attorney come and interview them and take a statement, and now you're all like best friends. I mean, Miss Stewart treating us like, thank you for being kind to my daughters, thank you, and us being, hey, thank you for telling the truth. In our heads, though, you're thinking, fucking killed this little boy, man, for fucking what, for fucking what? Because you wanted you wanted the foster care money. I mean, you didn't give a shit about it. I mean, those are all going through your head, but that's not part of the gig. There is no upside to expressing that. You still have a trial you want to win. You don't want to, you walk her to the lockup, you turn her kids over to other kids over to DCFS, which is a whole nother thing. Now you got these two teenage girls who have tried to do the right thing, but they've been sitting in this horror, hope for the best for them, but now they're in the system. It's a whole lot of just shit, man. Like, it is, but hey, for Allen, we found out what happened. And, we may be the people in this room, the two of us and this great staff here recording this for us. I mean, you know, and now hopefully you guys, I mean, we may be the only people that remember Allen Kalfus's name, right? And man, he deserves to be remembered. He had 6 years on this earth, may not have been happy, but he was not nobody. You know what I mean? Like, not to get too far off on this tangent, but
No, but the whole system, you know, and the experiences we've had with the system, and all these people exist to help everybody, and yet you still have this sadness, and then the anger and the rage and the disgust that we have to deal with. But then you know what? Then it's like, okay, that case is over, and now, you know, now there's new dead people we have to go take care of. So, you know, I'm sure this case bothered me for a long time, but this is 25 years later, and as you brought up the topic and said to come in, it all comes up again. And you know, I think over the years we learn, or for me, right, how to just file that terrible stuff away and maybe not think about it. Maybe that's how we deal with it. But then you see a movie or you see a case or you meet somebody else, and all of a sudden,
yep. Yeah, and here's the thing, man. I got no good news with this. There is no good news. There is no good, you know, it's better when you got somebody to be angry at. There's somebody there, but here's the truth of the matter. By the time this goes to trial, several years later, now she takes a plea deal and something less than first-degree murder, right? How does that happen? State's attorney screw that up? No, not necessarily. You're dealing with what you got to deal with. The main two witnesses are her daughters, right? So they're now older, and they're going to have to take their stand and stay on that story about, you know, this. And the truth of the matter is, in this world, it is my experience and my opinion that, you know, if a person goes out and kills a stranger's child, in a lot of places, they're going to go on death row. But if you kill your own children or it's a domestic thing, our system just doesn't treat it the same, right? And so in the end, I don't remember what she pled to, but I think it was short of 20 years. And I know she was out in less than 12 because I can remember being a more experienced detective, hearing that she had already been paroled out and thinking, Allen wouldn't even be out of high school yet, and she's out of prison. You know what I mean? Like, what are you going to get angry at? We still got, like you said, the murders keep coming. The work don't stop, right?
Watch the news, and there's a mom that couldn't handle it and kills her kids, and a boyfriend or girlfriend kills the kids because they're upset over something else. And
we're here talking we're here talking about Allen because, you know, it was our first case that we handled as lead detectives, first homicide we handled together, and he deserves to be remembered. But this was far and away not the only child murder we handled. We handled a lot of them. We had some ugly conversations with people over the years. I mean, this was just the first one, and I wanted Allen's name to be remembered. And I wanted to be able to sit and talk with you about it, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure we don't have enough time, but the two cases that came to mind as you renewed all these thoughts and feelings in me over this case were, you know, the other two cases, the little Mexican girl got accidentally shot, and then the kidnapping case where the families were fighting over a 6-month-old, and we had to respond and try to deal with that. But a lot of crime stories for you, detective.
Come back, talk about some more.
Sure, it'd be an honor. I think you got it.
So there you have it. It's not the easiest topic, I know. I told you it was going to be heavy. I wanted to kick off this season 3 with a case, going back to a case, talking about an investigation, talking about a victim that means something to me, and his name I think should be remembered. I appreciate you sticking through it with us. I appreciate you thinking about Allen Kalfus every once in a while, because I believe that as long as somebody's remembered, they're never really gone, you know? So it means a lot to me. Sam, brother, as always, love you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hope you'll be back. Thanks for the support. Detective Story. Remember, please like and subscribe. It means a lot to us. It keeps us telling these stories. It keeps these victims alive. We have a super aggressive schedule. We got a new studio. excited to be here. We've got 22 episodes scheduled with some really fascinating people this year. We're going to keep this going. We're going to try and solve some cases that are still open for some families that need help. Check us out on our Patreon page. That's a really great way to support us too. It helps us get more work done. So thank you again. We really appreciate it. I'm Mike Hammond. Thank you. Take care of yourself and take care of each other.